again. It takes me about every other week that I do a video. So today we're going to talk about the seven archangels, the counterpart to the seven fallen princes. And there is a couple stories that go along with it. And of course, I am the Scandinavian seer, is how they call me, seeress. And so let's get into the seven archangels and their counterparts and how they are related um, to mental illness. So let's jump in. The first one, I'm pretty sure everyone in their whole life at some point has heard this name in many different languages or denominations. And that is the one that is the most like God. That's how he's biblically written. That's how he's historically written, transcribed from other denominations, is Michael. Michael is considered the oldest. He's also the one that exacts justice. So he is seen as the justice issuer, but it's also, he's very charitable. So you can see him associated with a lot of charity. So they'll pray to Michael for protection, charity, as well as, well, please get the message to God. So, because he's pretty much the one that is most like him. He is what they would now consider the new right hand of God, the upper crust, the one that sits right next to him. And so he is associated with charity and justice. But as we go on, you can notice that he is considered the most like God. Now, that is how he is identified in biblical terms from Genesis to Samuel. And I also want to remind everybody that if you're reading the book, which is very thick, and it takes several readings, but you have to have a gain of intellect, communication style, but you have to have an inner enlightenment, ascension that goes on to be able to actually understand some of the texts. But when you're reading the text, anyone can pull out little phrases and mold it to what they need or what they would like everybody to believe that is associated with. But it loses its context if you pull it out. You need to read the whole chapter to understand the full concept behind that one phrase. If you pull it out and you use it outside of that context, and that the true meaning of what that phrase was meant for, then aren't you just exhibiting deceit, one of the seven deadly sins? So let's just be mindful when we're reading it. So when Michael does this, but as we go, it says no other God above me. And that is true. However, God has labeled several of these archangels as gods over dominions, over a specific set of skills. And that's because they oversee all of them. They are the top of that. Dominion. So Raphael is, for example. So number 2 archangel is Raphael. And Raphael is the god, he labeled him as the god of healing. And so you'll notice a lot of churches, a lot of monasteries will pray or have Raphael around, because he is also associated with the word temperance. And temperance is all about healing, internal peace, humility. And so he's associated with charity as well, except that he's more of the internal healing. And you'll see that a lot of them in Catholicism, where they pray to Raphael to come and heal the sick. So he is considered the god of healing. And then we have the third one, which is Gabriel. And I'm giving you the top 3 because those are the ones, when we think of archangels, those are the 3 names that pop into everybody's head. Gabriel is the god of strength. So he is associated with strength, and he oversees that dominions of will, kindness, faith, and it's more of internal strength. Not so much physical strength, because you won't need that physical if you are an internally strong person, basically. And you have faith that Gabriel will be there. Michael will bring you what you need for clarity and humility, and then Raphael will help make sure that everything is healed. And so Gabriel is considered the god of strength. And then you have Shamuel, and that's number 4. And he is the god of the seas, the eyes, though, not the oceans, but the eye. So he is the one that I see. He sees for God. And so he is the witness. Shamuel is part of the truth. So he sees what's there, but then you have to not lie. So you don't deceit. So he is the opposite of that. And then you have Uriel. And Uriel is a little funny story because he is considered the god of light. And this is where he took over. And then this is where the story of Lucifer comes in, because Lucifer used to be considered the god of shining, the Lord of the light. And so Uriel, he's one that he was swayed between the fallen princes and the archangels when the big battle came out before Lucifer fell. And so he is considered the wisdom, the wise one. And if you can say also he's the one that speaks what he sees. And then he actually has to go with the truth speaker, which is, Gabriel is the Lord of strength, but humility and speech. So he is the one that sees, gods of sees. He's the light. And Shamuel is the one that sees the truth. And Uriel's the one who tells it. He sees it, so he'll prove it. So then we have number 6, and that's Zadquiel. So Zadquiel, it's kind of funny how this is where it converts. So your lower gods, your upper archangels are considered gods over dominions or a domain. And here's where it becomes a characteristic. So Zadquiel, this is where it's the righteous of God. So this is where they convert from the god of a domain to a characteristic of God. So Zadquiel is all about the righteousness. And righteousness is, am I living to the most proper of my internal beings of how I was created? Am I adhering to the ways of being that God had put us there, and over all the transgressions? So to balance you out, you have to have the yang and the yin. Well, he is all, are you living to the righteous? There's an old saying, not even really an old saying, but there's a saying that keeps going around, and it just keeps morphing all the time, is do the right thing even if nobody knows. Do the right thing even if nobody sees. Do the right thing even if nobody else is doing it. And that really is kind of leads to the righteousness. Same thing with the golden rule, is do unto others as you would want them to do unto you, and not expect them to do it to you all the time. But you live righteous for your own internal soul only. And that you would hope that others would, but as long as you're living righteous, then others can't get to you. And that's the caveat right there with the righteousness. So Zadquiel is all about, and I've heard it said several different ways, like Zadquiel or Quile. But it's you can tell by the archangels of who their ranking is by the last syllables of the word. Okay, and then we have the 7th one is Jophiel. And Jophiel is all about the radiance or the beauty of God. So beauty is different. And we look at it as the exterior. And the beauty of God is really about all the nature's things, the beauty that he created, how each individual organism, each individual characteristic of a person is unique and beautiful. As long as they're living up to the righteousness, you radiate a different set of light as well. So the archangels are not just about characteristics or mannerisms or behavior. They are entire internal states of being and internal states of protection to make sure. So Michael is all about, the older one. He is your humility. Humility is a characteristics that humbles you inside. So you're always checking your heart. Right. So that making sure that you're not overcompensating with your brain to your heart, to your body, physical needs, that there's a balance within those three. And then Raphael is all about the God of healing. He is like, well, you have to balance, you have to temper. Temper is all about taking a step back and breathing, right? And looking at the situation is not to And it's not temper, it's temperance. Temperance is really more of an internal balance, like the scale. But there is a three-way. So there's the spirit, there's you, and then there's your heart and your mind. So you got to balance your heart with your mind. And your mind is liking to tell stories. So not all the time is it true. I've said that before. You have to make sure that that's always put in check, I guess. And then you have Gabriel, and he is, of course, the god of strength. He is your balancer. He is your internal strength as well, not just external. So that also is key to know, that a lot of these are internal balances, internal strength to persevere when you are up against outside forces that are trying to sway you. Get it? Sway you. And then Camuel, and he is all about the god of seeing. He wants you to see what you are. If you also can understand, they're also your senses, your urges, and then your spirit. And we'll talk about that another time, because there's a significance with 7. All right, so the counterbalance, let's go back into that. So I'm going to tell you the story of Lucifer again. But Lucifer was known as the god of, the shining. He was the shining prince. There's the story that he is also the light bearer. So he is the one who orchestrates the lights, which is associated with Uriel, who is the god of light, or he was given that domain. So the story was that Lucifer, when he was up in, he was considered the upper crust, and Michael, he wanted to get up there with Michael, but he was being, he was kind of like the right hand, that there was a big battle of who was closer to God. And so there's a huge battle up there in heaven. And Lucifer was associated with being technically the god of light, except that he was the overall arching god. And that the archangels now battled because they thought that Lucifer and them were conspiring against God. So they stood in between Lucifer, his 7 princes, and God, to protect God, and overthrew him, but God was unbeknownst about it. That's how it came. And then the story came after Lucifer and them were thrown down to earth. And there's where the story kind of goes a little wonky, because you don't know if he was cast out by God or cast out by the 7 archangels, because the story in some texts, Book of Enoch and some of those, that it's questionable of who actually threw Lucifer and his 7 out. And that the sadness comes from the Lord of Seas, which is Camuel, is not showing God the truth, that the battle was actually between the archangels and the 7 princes. So Lucifer is considered the god of shine. He's still considered that, but he's also the fallen prince. So now he has taken over the dark north down here, or hell, and that he is still the bearer of light, which was able to sway Uriel at a couple points that brought the 200 more down. So that is the story that goes with Lucifer. But let's move on to the rest of them. So Michael is kind of a counterbalance. So he is all about justice. He is the oldest of charity. And so if you notice that was one of the counterbalances that will be needed for the 7 deadly sins, you will need charity. But remember, we had Beelzebub, and Beelzebub was about gluttony, overeating. And so that is all about temperance. Temperance, you need that to kind of be humility, but it's a god of healing. So if you notice that some of these archangels actually take over more than 1 or 2 of the criterias that the 7 fallen princes have. So let's say there's lust and envy, and lust and envy would be considered part of that needing to see. And so to see the truth. And so the truth would be seen. And so the counterbalance of those would be Camuel. And then, of course, the Michael is the overseer of all of them. So he would come in, but you would need the strength to see that. So you need Gabriel. And so that it took more than just one prince to over dominate. But you can see your characteristics, which are 6 and 7, Zadquiel. And Jophiel will not be one of those ones that you would enlist to help you battle one of the 7 deadly sins from the 7 fallen princes or one of the 7 girls of the underworld. It is a balanced part. You need to have those characteristics, which is righteousness. And of course, you have to see the beauty. And that's where I'll go with the other part. So let's go to Belphegor was the last 7 fallen princes that I had said before. Sometimes I trail off, I'm sorry. And he is associated with sloth. And to counterbalance sloth, you were going to need temperance. And sloth is all about being wise enough. So you would need Ural for wisdom because he is the bearer of light or the god of light. And then you would need Raphael because he is temperance. He gives you healing from inside, but he gives you humility. Sloth is all about not taking ownership to go on your righteous path. So you would have to have righteousness and seeing the beauty in the religious texts to be able to override the sloth or the laziness to transform your soul. So Belphegor is associated, of course, when he was up there with sloth and laziness because it was more of a tester. He was more of, okay, who's got it? And then to counterbalance, you would need your friends on the other side of the right hands, Ural for the light, and you would definitely need Gabriel for faith, and then you would need Raphael for humility and the strength and healing. So that is the 7th one of the fallen princes. Now let's go to the 6th one, and his name was the Leviathan, and he was about envy. Now envy, remember how I told you, and there's a girl, a sister of the underworld that is also envious. And envy is all about having this internal grossness, they wishing from internally, energetically, in a frequency, the death or the ill of something else because you are so jealous that you want what they have. And it's more of, I don't want them to have it. So Leviathans actually oversaw that and they would internally eat you. And so if you've seen some of those supernatural videos or whatever, I'm not an advocate or I don't get kickbacks from that, but they talked about how they would show the form of the Leviathan, and even in the biblical text that it would dominate and eat, like eat your head off. And that's kind of what envious does is once you let envy in, it takes, well, it could take all the archangels and God himself to kind of help dominate that. So the only counterbalance for that one was you need the one that is the most like God, which is Michael, which is also healing. He gives justice. But he also calls in the other archangels needed because that is probably one of the hardest ones to fight is envy. And so he'll bring in temperance and wisdom, but he also will bring in the beauty. And the beauty is internal beauty. Do you not recognize the internal beauty that you have? Because that is pretty much what feeds envy, is self-loathing and internal hate. And you are a beautiful creature. You were created that way. So he has to bring in some of the characteristics. And part of that is he needs them to see the beauty within themselves. So he is going to get the light seer, which is Camuat. And then you have Asmodeus or Asmodeus, and that was about lust. And lust is all about internal gratification. Not all the time is it a sexual thing, except that this world in our modern time, they want to associate lust with sex. But lust is all about having an internal gratification. So if you were going to talk about overindulgence or a prowessness, that would be it. Lust is wanting to dominate something else. And it is more of diminishing kingdoms from kingdoms and having a swift tongue. So there is also a girl, sister of the underworld that is associated with that. But to conquer lust, you're definitely going to have temperance, which is Raphael. And he is all about healing. He's about clarity. He's about humility, but he's also about kindness. And kindness is all about the opposite of lust. And you don't want to dominate, because lust is unlusting after somebody else's stuff. And it's mostly kingdoms, men after men, and what men own. And so it's belongings that they want to dominate, money, monetary stuff. And so Raphael brings in temperance. And then, of course, we have Memon. And Memon is all about greed. And that is also there. But greed is associated with mostly dominations of other stuff. So Raphael would need to be called in on that. But greed is not just a monetary thing. Greed could be farmland. Greed could be having all the attention on me. So vanity would be considered closest to greed. And so part of that would be you would need Shamuel for the light to see God's vision, because you're looking outward and not inward for your value. So greed is associated with if I have all of that, then maybe I'm a value. And so Shamuel would be the one that they would call in, and it'd give you, see you, but then he would need the characteristics. So he would probably have Jophiel because he sees the beauty of God to help him with some of those characteristics. And then, of course, he would need faith, which is Gabriel. So he would actually ask Gabriel to come because it's also about kindness. Being kind to yourself, really. And then we have Satan. And Satan so often, now this is another story, is Satan, in some texts, he would be called Samuel. Samuel, one of the fallen, is Samuel. But it was more of the justice, but he is associated with wrath. So Satan is associated with wrath, but so is Samuel. And that is the one of the fallen one that was down. But he's also one of well, he's also named one of the gods. So he's the god of poison. So this is where I've been. The hardest thing to struggle is to figure out which one is exactly named. So a lot of the texts, like I said, would identify him as the god of poison. So his job in heaven was to exact punishment, because the consequence, because remember, there's the dark side and the light side, but God always had, let wrath be on me. And he had angels, his guards, to go out and exact justice on my behalf. And so now you're seeing, and we're going to go back to the story of the battle up in heaven of exacting justice. So Samuel, Satan, Samuel, there's many different ways to say that name. Those are supposed to be the same. Even in the book of Enoch, those two angels are, the names are interchangeable. But Satan is what we have heard as being connected with Lucifer, and those two are not the same person or angel, but they are often associated as being one, but they're not. So Samuel and Samuel and Satan are, and it's associated with wrath. And Samuel is the god of poison, and Satan is wrath, which is anger and exacting punishment, death, anger, outburst. So those two, I believe, and in several documentations, those are two of the same. Lucifer is not the same, but those two are the same person or angel, and they are the ones that exact punishment, poison, internal death, anger, overriding yourself. And so they are associated, and their counterbalance is, of course, Michael, because he is the justice, but he also brings in a humility and charity, because that is a counterbalance. But temperance is another one. Temperance, and so Michael and Raphael are the ones that would be more than likely the ones that would go up and battle that that characteristic. It's the yin and the yang, the negative and the positive. And so, you have the Lord of the wrath, and then you have the Lord of poison, sorry, the god of poison, being the same person, and then you would have to have your two upper people. So this is where he is associated. Beelzebub also is the gluttony, but I think I've spoken to that. And so Beelzebub is gluttony. It's all about overindulgence, addiction, and so then Gabriel would be the one that would need to be called in, because you need to have faith, faith and temperance, but faith is really what it is. So Beelzebub being gluttony, he would be the one that would need the god of strength. And the god of strength is to have faith. Don't rush, just sit. Things will come to you. Don't overindulge and go to it, because that is where it causes the dissonance inside. And it causes you to battle and constantly try to one up everybody else. And that's where addiction comes from, is you're trying to seek something that is not there, but you want it because it's somebody else's, or you want it because you think that that is who you have to have, or that makes you important to keep that. So most of gluttony is associated with overindulgence. And overindulgence in anything is, once I like it, I'm going to keep using it and using it and using it. And the counterbalance is Gabriel is the god of strength. No, you don't really need it all. Have faith, relax. That's kind of where God of the strength is needed. But then we're going to go back to Satan. So Satan and Samuel, those being the same person, links up with Lucifer, who is the Lord of Light. And I think in one of the other ones, there's another versions of Satan's name, Samuel, Samzium. And you could look in some of the books. They are pretty much linked together. Those two got together and they battled their counterparts in heaven. And they just seem to be casted out. I have my theories of why they're cast out. I also have my theories up there of why the dark side, the gods of over the darkness of us being up in the same realm as the gods of the light. And then we have the creator that created all, that's balancing both of them and is trusting on both sides. It's almost like a family systemic thing where sibling tells on sibling, but then they keep those siblings that they told on out of the loop, so daddy couldn't check. That kind of thing. And that's kind of really what the storyline goes for, is Lucifer and Michael had a big battle. They both wanted to watch over the humans down here. One was fighting like they needed to have all the knowledge because they were more logic side, they were more the dark cold side. Lucifer and them, the dark cold side. Even dialectics will tell you about this. Mindfulness, Buddhism will talk in the realms of the yin and the yang, the dark side being more of our shadowy side. And then you have your light side with saying, no, they don't need to do that. We'll protect them from themselves. And so then you have Michael and all those archangels trying to protect the human race from the secrets or the alchemy of the dark side. And so then the big battle is ensued up in heaven, and the two strongest that dominated the most from an internal spectrum would be Lucifer and Satan, or Samuel, Samsa. And then you had your others, which are your archangels, which are the three together, which are Michael, Raphael, and Gabriel. But then you would have the Leviathan that was closely linked to Satan and Lucifer being the stronger, but Mammon is the seer. So that those are your counterbalances. So the seven archangels again, you can see how those stories go. And God was very upset, according to many scriptures and like I said, there is, you need to read the whole chapter. In Samuel 2, this is an actual biblical chapter, 3:38, it is basically that whole chapter is on how God was very upset that a great, and it, in quotations, do you not know, people of Israel, a great prince has fallen from heaven today. And so it leads you to say, down to Israel. So, where is it? Yeah. So God may not have known the whole truth, or he may. And now we're where we are. So the seven archangels. Michael, he's the closest, most like God. Raphael, and he's the god of healing. Then you have Gabriel, the god of strength. Camiel, the god of the seas. He means he sees for the guys. He's the eyes, God's eyes. And then Uriel, he is the god of light. Then you have your two righteousness, which is Zidquil, and he is the righteous of God. And then you had Jophiel, which is the beauty of God. So he shows the world of beauty. And those are your archangels and their counterbalances, or you can go back to that video over there. I know I trail on, but there is a method to this, and it's just easier for me to break them up into little sections because there's a lot of information, and I haven't even connected them all together, because at the end I'm going to connect them together. But if you can tell, there's a theme. If you go back to the first videos of the 7 deadly sins and how ego plays into it, and how Buddhist and mindfulness, they all kind of is an internal scope, and how the shadowy side is linked to some of our mental illness and our dissonances within, but also how there is the answer within these documentations, because Christianity is the most widely spread book of historical. But if you really look into the depths of each text and really go in and read the book, you can see that there's a connections between Buddhism, their state of being, Judaism, and their state of being. I know they're not going to like hearing that. But me as a Scandinavian seeress, we also think the same. But our gods are labeled that way doesn't mean we have a god of light. You know, we have Thor, the lightning god. We have Odin, but there even is a overthrow in the Asgardians and the Vanir's. And Vanir's lost. And so that's why the Asgardians are in power, and that's Odin and Thor. But Freya was a Vanir and her twin, and they ended up being able to cross over and work. And she is one of the most beloved goddess of Odin. And so there's a lot of connectivity, and the biggest theme is the shadowy side needs the balance of the light side, and the light side needs the balance of the shadow side. And until they work together, and then there's the middle state of how do you keep a balance between both without overcasting and diminishing the righteousness and the beauty that you were created from. That is the key. So on next video, I'm going to do, and it's going to be the 7 ladies that are the counterparts of the 7 sisters of the underworld. So, and I hate calling that because it's just the 7 girls of the shadow side. So I'm going to actually convert it to the 7 shadowy side. And at some point I'm going to redo these videos, but I just wanted to get the information out. And when I connect them together, it's going to be a really long one, and it may be like a 3-parter. All right. Thanks for showing.